Hello and welcome to Community Association Insurance 101, sponsored by Willis Towers Watson and Embroker. If we have not had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Melissa Rogers, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development here with Heritage Property Management Services. While we will be speaking about community-specific topics for your community, we do encourage each of you to contact your association's attorney should you have any specific questions about your community after participating. This class is meant for pure educational enjoyment and budget assistance. Each of you are free to submit questions in the Q&A section, which is located in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. However, please do not hesitate to submit them throughout the presentation. If this is your first time attending Heritage University, welcome. We're so glad that you are joining us today. Heritage University offers a number of classes throughout the year, and you can find our schedule by visiting heritageproperty.com and selecting Homeowner Resources. Each of you attending tonight will get a full recording of the event and full access to the questions or any content that we share tonight. So please put in your ear pods, pour a drink of whatever you'd like, and enjoy the next 60 minutes of insurance fun. I now introduce you to Daniel Thomas.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, as always, thank you to Heritage for just always inviting us back and partnering with us for our coverages and solutions here. We just really enjoy these times together. So we'll get started right away. I know we've got a little bit to cover tonight, and we'll try to keep it fast-paced and applicable to what everyone wants to learn about, especially what's happening in the marketplace as well as others. So we'll jump right in and go to our first next slides if we can, Joshua. So tonight we're going to spend about 45 minutes on the introduction of just basic Insurance 101, kind of the different coverages and things that are applicable to the different associations and things that everyone manages here from a board's perspective, as well as anyone involved with your property insurance and liability and other coverages. And then we'd like to go through some different markets, solutions, and strategies, as we all are well aware of the current market is not the most agreeable or friendly. We're starting to see some of that stabilize, which is a much needed relief, but we'll go into some of those details, which markets and different coverages to look out for and things of that nature. And then we'll come out for a little Q&A towards the end to help with whatever we can. So we'll again try to keep this applicable and not get too far into the weeds on insurance and put everybody to sleep too early the night before your shows come on. So, of course, we have thanks again to all of our Heritage partners, Josh, Kate, Melissa, and Danielle, who couldn't be here. We just really always enjoy these times together, and we all learn something and take it away from these events. From our team, we have myself and then Patrick McGuire, who works and partners with Heritage, and then Art from our broker team as well, to go through some different strategies and solutions and just take general questions. So we can go to the next slide, Josh. We'll just do a quick run through of some of the things that we really have enjoyed with Willis Towers Watson and Broker partnering with Heritage regarding the placement of risk coverages for the different client partners that Heritage manages. So, we like to start, of course, with negotiation and placement. That's always an important part of the piece. But then two other pieces that roll into that would be analyzing the coverages, looking at the contracts, and then also preventing those different claims. But most importantly, when claims do happen, the coverage that is needed is there and that it performs properly. So that's our goal, and we hope it always functions the right way it can. Josh, we can go to the next slide, please. We won't say too much about this, but just that our focus, of course, is for everyone. Insurance is something that is a required necessity, that hopefully in the entire time that you have it, you never have to utilize it, but when you do, that it is there and functions as it should, that it's a smooth process, that it's most cost competitive for the coverage afforded, and that you get all different options at certain times as needed. That's the core part goal of what we like to do from our servicing perspective. We go to the next slide, Josh. So now we'll get into some of the meat of the coverages from a high level. And again, if some of this is elementary, we won't go too deep. But we think it's always important to refresh our memories on how different coverages apply and understand why they're purchased, why they're needed, and then how they should function in the event of a loss. So we can go to the next slide. So here are the basics. These are kind of the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of insurance that we all know and have learned to be more accustomed with and are familiar with. One that we see most commonly used, especially on premises liability, would be general liability. So anytime you have a third party, property damage, injury to someone, those are the coverages that will come into place to protect you and your financial assets. This is needed for anyone that rents a place, owns a home, owns a condo, townhome, anything of that nature. You're going to want to have certain limits, make sure that they're adequate, and then also look at potentially an excess liability cover as well to sit over those. If anyone's visiting your home, unfortunately bitten by a pet, slips and falls, or something happens to them where they're injured in any kind of bodily way that is at your fault, this is where that coverage steps in. It is a third party coverage. Will not actually cover the policy holder in the event of an injury. This is meant for folks that are visiting on your premises and other things they might bring as a third party litigation against yourself. Another one that, of course, we will talk about that is most susceptible to damage and being utilized is property insurance. Any kind of physical property that is damaged due to theft, fire, other perils. We see water damage a lot. How adequate is flood right now, leaking roofs, things of that nature. We're here in Georgia experiencing, goodness, I think the first of many days of torrential downpours. This is where property insurance will come in, minus the cost of your deductible, and then put you back whole for like kind and quality for your property. Equipment breakdown, this would be more along the lines of mechanical or specialized equipment, breakers, air conditioning, things of that nature that suffer normal wear and tear, but due to any kind of specialized electronic surge, we see with lightning at the moment, things of that nature that we damage, that would help cover those costs. Another one you'll see a lot of times, which is you'll have on not so much on a personal policy, but on a group policy or one that covers the association, would be hiring a non-owned auto. It's a person using a vehicle that's not owned, but is in their care, custody, and control, and that someone is injured in when they're doing business or conducting any kind of trip or things of that nature on behalf of the entity for which the policy is covered. So this would step in and add additional limits and excess coverage for those kinds of claims. We go to the next slide, Josh. One that feeds into that as well would be auto liability. This one is not as much utilized for the different association policies you purchase here, as everyone should have their own personal auto insurance. But this is one that we've seen been utilized, especially right now with less cars on the road. We see that the injuries have been more severe, and some of the things, if collisions have really caused those kinds of damages to tick up, especially with distracted driving and the cost to repair or replace current auto vehicles has just continued to increase. One I referenced earlier that would be one over your general liability, which we call umbrella liability. It is an additional layer of coverage that sits primarily over your casualty lines. It would help you with any kind of auto damage, workers' compensation, if that's applicable, but primarily your general liability if additional limits are needed. Hopefully these coverages are, the umbrella is never utilized, or as we say in the insurance world, pierced to where you're accessing those limits. But at some points, we do know that bad things happen that are unforeseen and out of our control, and you want to make sure that you have the afforded coverages to protect your own personal assets as you manage the different associations. We can go to the next slide, Josh. This one's important as someone as you're leading and managing and helping with the different management decisions and functional decisions of day-to-day coverage purchases for your associations would be directors and officers liability. This one's got a lot of coverage here in the past couple of years, especially in the public and private company sector for how people are managing funds, for acquisitions and things of that nature. But it's just overall is a broad, almost an all risk type of policy for claims that can be brought against those in a D&O perspective for decisions that acting in the course of direction of the board. We have seen this one, as we'll get into a little bit later in the marketplace, become more of a difficult line of coverage to place. It was not adequately priced in the past, a little bit underpriced, and we're seeing that start to increase up. Crime coverage, this is for loss or vandalization or different mismanagement of funds within the ones that you're entrusted with, within the HOAs and associations out there. And it's just a much needed coverage in today's unfortunate litigation circumstances. Employment practice liability, not one that is as much utilized since there's not as many employees or things of that nature under control or direction or recourse. A lot of these types of litigation fall under the directors and officers, but another coverage that's been grown in popularity and necessity here in the past several years. And then fiduciary liability as well for the management of employee benefit plans, retirement pensions, things of that nature, which hopefully we don't see as much here for these types of coverages. Josh, can we go to the next slide for me? One I'll jump down to here because ERISA would not apply as much. We won't spend as much time there, but cyber liability has gotten to be, a daily topic, one that changes hourly. Unfortunately, with the new work from home environment due to COVID and other things, virtual private networks and folks working from laptops as we all are tonight, virtually discussions and having meetings. This is just right for bad actors and threat hosts out there to be using their unfortunate intellects for bad instead of good. And we're seeing this be a much needed coverage. It used to be a rather affordable coverage that was just kind of a throw in at some points, use that tongue in cheek, but one that was more cost competitive, wasn't really sure if it'd ever be utilized, but now it's just become a staple within the property and casualty and executive lines types of coverage. Workers' compensation, this line of coverage for workers under direct course and control or supervision, again, would not be as applicable with different coverages here, but if there are on-site maintenance or landscaping or different things of that nature for larger associations, you'd want to make sure you have what we call contingent workers' compensation to cover anyone for injury while on the job. We'll go to the next slide, Josh. So here's where we'll really get into some of the things that help you prepare better and utilize all of course, our team here or your heritage team, your different property managers that you deal with daily and have those relationships with, but just to prepare yourselves for what could potentially take place in the coming 2021 to 2022 renewal year. We'll start off with, of course, the one most noted is property market on the next slide, Josh. And we'll talk about what are the factors driving this. Of course, we've had unfortunate catastrophes the past several years. We've seen capacity greatly reduced. When you're having ice storms in Texas or multiple hurricanes, even some of these different unforeseen technology outages, things of that nature that just slow down the function and impact all states of living. We've seen underwriters become more scrutinous around what they're actually offering coverages for, being able to require higher rates for those coverages, and also add additional exclusions related to several lines of coverage, such as cyber and COVID-19. As I said, we're seeing a lot more just notifications and more investigations around the types of risk engineering, as we would say, controls in place. What are the qualities? How are the properties constructed? The ages? How are they maintained? Sprinklers? all the different things we've thought about in the past that have come into play, but really being highlighted here in this current hardening market. The good news is we are seeing additional capacity start to flow in and stabilize. Some of the underwriters and leadership within the multitude of insurance companies out there are feeling more comfortable about the pricing, but we don't see this being in any way reduced moving forward. We're just not seeing the increases be as severe. So that is welcome relief in our industry, and we're happy to see that. We can go to the next slide, Josh. So some of the things I just mentioned here recently are, business interruption. We've seen a lot of underwriters having issues around that. That wouldn't be as applicable here, but just with the COVID environment, we are seeing, some businesses close, unfortunately, which restricts open real estate. We have vacancy provisions, more susceptible to theft, vandalism. We've seen water damage, things that aren't as well maintained to become really under lock and key of some of these underwriters, some of the insurance companies wanting to know what is going on with these certain locations. The good news is the majority of this is residential, and then everyone's home. We're all home working from our home offices, actually doing more renovations. The home improvement and Home Depots of the world are really glad to see all of this taking place, as well as the underwriters are, and we're hoping that this sees a lot of increases in fire, loss prevention, safety, and different just general updates that needed to be done on residential properties, all kind of shift in the next year or two into safer places to live, therefore adding insurance to be a little more of a softer market as we trend into that. We can go to the next slide, Josh, please. So middle market challenges and trends. This kind of is a broad view of some of the different lines of coverage. We just talked about property. This gives you, and as Melissa said, we'll send out these slides so you have them for reference, and don't scribble too fast. But property we're seeing is about 10 to 15. I would have said 6 months ago that was more of a 15 to 25. So again, seeing a little relief there. General liability would be 5 to 10%. And that one probably would have been more of a 10 to 20 here recently. So everything's about 10%. Starting to see a little bit of relief. Auto liability is probably going to be stuck about that 10 to 15% number. It has been for the past several years and will continue to be. Workers' compensation has been one that's been more friendly. And then umbrella liability for this type of industry, I would say this is applicable 15 to 30%. In other larger industries, we've seen it be as high as 100% or 50. So glad to see that it's being more advantageous for residential properties. Some of the challenging risk, older homes, older buildings, not as properly maintained, non-sprinklered, they still will see some increases such as 25 to 50%. Losses could be a contributing factor to that if there's not a good story to tell the underwriters and the different insurance companies of how it's been resolved. Liability, auto, with claims can continue to trickle up some. And then umbrella and lead, as I mentioned, have been upwards of 100%, but hopefully none of that will be bearing down on this type of industry today or into any of your coverages. We can go to the next slide, Josh. I won't stick too much on this one. We can kind of hang out with the general liability. Just again, we've seen a lot of heightened concern surrounding carriers just reevaluating the current crisis management limits, looking at different capacities that markets are no longer offering certain limits. We've seen nuclear verdicts, as we say, 7 figures. It used to be just astronomical. Now that's not even a question for some different types of negligence or gross negligent type of coverages or verdicts. So unfortunate, but we are seeing this liability continue to be heightened through some of those. And then the concern around vandalism, the social injustice, human trafficking exposures around just overall residential real estate accounts has been a heightened concern for our underwriters. Go to the next slide there, Josh. So this is kind of a last year snapshot, shows how we finished out with 2020 there in the Q4, where things trickled out. As you see, the excess liability for casualty was the highest at 73%. Thank goodness we've seen this kind of slowly start to see additional carriers and capacity come into play this first quarter, and that's slowing the ease or the burn, so to speak. But again, it's not a soft market by any means, and we don't see it going downwards at least for another year or so. We can go to the next slide. So this is a little bit more, again, just another way of prognosing the different types of coverage lines for the liability and the casualty lines. Like I mentioned before, with the excess and with the liability, we're just seeing these nuclear verdicts, a lot of and then a highly just organized plaintiff bar. We're seeing a lot of attorneys that are becoming very susceptible to target, especially where there's something that should have been remedied and it wasn't. So we're trying to navigate those as best we can. And again, that's all in loss prevention, which is always the best way to prevent a claim, is to make it where it never happens. So that would be your goal, and that'd be your task as you manage your different locations. And I know your heritage team is happy to help with that. So again, one that I mentioned that we thought we would speak a little further on is the umbrella and excess casualty market, or lines of coverage. We're wanting to just make everyone aware and kind of get out in front of, prepare for potentially higher attachment points or higher deductibles or retentions. A lot of times in these larger real estate and residential locations, just due to unsupported leads or reduced capacity, as we would say, not as many carriers are willing to write larger limits, and that's squeezing the abilities or the limits that are out there for coverages. There's still viable options. There's some new capacity coming in, but again, more scrutiny around underwriting and just being a little more strategic with our teams here, which is our task, and your heritage team, to help you navigate those and to find the best coverages for the best risk, and also reassess limits and attachment points and make sure where the cost for those limits is applicable. We can go to the next one, Josh. So with this one, I think I'll give myself a rest here and turn over to Patrick. If you want to, from our team, talk a little bit about what we call the financial executive, or the management liability and directors officers marketplace, showing how some of these coverages have been increasing in the past several years.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Patrick. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, again, just off of what Daniel said, this is more of our financial lines division, and we have seen a little bit of a decrease in the rate in the past year, which is nice. But those higher, I guess, awards in the lawsuits were the result of the increases, but we've seen the challenges as far as the pressure and the higher attachment and retentions, and then the pressure to push back on valuable coverages. And then I guess moving forward, you can see, I guess, on the right side, IPOs are increasing again, and then bankruptcy has also gone up as a result of a lot of things going on with COVID and in the past year. So Josh, can I get the next slide, please? So again, this is cyber liability, which is also part of our financial lines market. This has a rate increase of about 25 to 50%. With everything going on that Daniel kind of touched on earlier, as far as people working at home, using your VPNs, things of that nature. But we have started to see those come down a little bit, but I mean, the average, you can see in the average cost of the data breach in 2020 was over $3.86 million. So those costs are remaining high. Can I get the next slide, please? And then this was another slide we just wanted to add in here just as a refresher. COVID-19 has obviously been a big topic on everyone's mind in the past year. and we've seen just kind of an increase in clients kind of repurposing their locations to accommodate, and that's resulted in increasing costs, but there's concerns as far as your work comp and different rules and regulations. So hopefully as time goes by and we start to recover a little bit, you'll start to see a little bit of relief as far as that goes in relation to your insurance coverage. Can I get the next slide, please? And
one thing, I'll add to what you're saying. What we're starting to see, and this would be the task of your heritage team as well as your directors, nothing that nature, or say someone was unfortunately infected with COVID-19. So I would just your minutes there's not any carriers out there that have lost the battle on offering COVID coverages for any kind of liability. So be aware of that. As we enter out where the vaccine is out and we see things being reopened, not as much of a necessity.
Daniel, I think we might be losing you a little bit. Art, I don't know if you are having a hard time too, but I know Daniel was having some issues with the tornadoes, getting a good connection. So
yeah, I think we can go on and let Daniel get his Wi-Fi back.
See if we, yeah, sorry about that. Josh, if you want to pass it over to Art, I think Daniel may be having some connection issues.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, for anyone who hasn't interacted with Embroker yet, we work with Heritage as well as Willis to help place a lot of the policies for these for the community associations and help administer it themselves. So a lot of the detail that Daniel and Patrick had just gone over as far as what's driving the market, we help with actually placing it with carriers. We take a lot of the same approach as Daniel posted on that first slide for service. So coverage analysis, claim advocacy, risk control, and we apply that and try to place coverage for you. So I think next slide, we'll start to go over kind of most commonly used markets, and I will try to go through this quickly so we can get to the fun stuff, which I think is Q&A. This is kind of the heart of it. I'm sure most people on the call will recognize these carriers as either your current provider or past: Travelers, Nationwide, Hanover, USLI, as well as others. We see Philadelphia, Travelers, and Nationwide the most right now. However, as Daniel mentioned, we are seeing a little bit of hardening, about 5 to 10% on average, if there isn't any claim activity. Go on to the next slide. So as Daniel and Patrick both touched on, D&O, which is kind of a hot item right now within the insurance space. It is not quite as hard for HOAs yet, but it's definitely getting there. So we use Travelers, Hanover, USLI, Chubb, Nationwide quite a bit, with USLI being one of our favorite carriers. It's a Berkshire Hathaway company due to full prior acts coverage. Go on the next slide. And general liability property, similar to that first slide that we talked about. This is kind of the heart of your package. Philadelphia and nationwide, Hanover, we tend to see a lot of. Hard markets definitely not spared the HOAs. As mentioned, it's going up 5 to 10% on average, and if there's significant exposure or significant claim activity, it will get more and more difficult, as what we're seeing. We're seeing per unit deductibles, particularly regarding water damage. We're seeing percentage separate deductibles for wind and hail, which clearly, given even today's occurrences, is a serious issue as well. Next slide. Crime, which is an add-on to all the policies, using the same markets that we mentioned. So Travelers, USLI, and if available, we go ahead and put that on the package policy. General rule of thumb is to make sure we insure up to the cash on hand or 1 year's worth of association membership dues. Next slide. Yeah, voluntary workers' comp, as often required in the bylaws. Some of the heritage associations definitely carry this coverage, though it's not super common from what we're seeing right now. Next slide. And this is another item that we've been seeing come up more and more frequently with the current marketing. Most HOAs, they don't necessarily need an umbrella more than $1.2 million or two, but we are getting that request more frequently. So there are a few carriers that will go higher up in the limits. So you'll see Distinguished, which does an umbrella with Great American, $10 million or more, and a few MGAs that'll go higher up. It's mainly for larger HOAs and communities. Next slide. Yeah, I think this is the fun part for all of us now.
Yeah, thanks, Hart and Patrick. Hopefully y'all can hear me now. Am I back?
Much better now.
Okay, great. No, I appreciate y'all jumping in there. As you stated, Art, there are some different lines of coverage out there and different carriers that are providing markets, as we continue to stabilize. I don't think we're by any means out of the woods yet, but we do not see or foresee the large increases, the coming few months for renewals. So that is good, maybe not as strong. So here's some, I know, Melissa, you can probably jump in, but we can have any kind of questions there in the chat box. Happy to answer those as they come in. Again, we are available, make sure our emails and things go out at the end of the presentation for any questions that could be helpful. But, maybe we break these up a little bit, Art, and you and myself can spearhead these. But, one question we typically get, which is everyone's thoughts, even my own, on homeowners and other lines of coverage would be, how soon can you start your renewal process? What are the best times to where you're not at the bottom of the underwriter stack, or your risk is not, but also you're starting effectively where things are still fresh in your mind. So we like to say a lot of times, 90 to 120 days is a good time to start to gather information, send it over to your different providers, send it over to your assistants there with Heritage and Embroker team to have the different lines of coverage reviewed, what's out there, what carriers might potentially be offering capacity in this space. The good news is that the majority of all of us here in Georgia, where barring the tornadoes we've seen in the severe weather lately, we're not a coastal or a flood zone type of risk, such as Florida or those down in the Gulf, but we are seeing some of these windstorms cause more havoc with underwriting capacity. So that's one that, the sooner we can get out there and look at potential options or confirm that the current program is the best, that there's no other one out there. Maybe we tweak a few coverages, maybe we look at some deductible changes. But I would suggest that 120 days before renewal would be adequate time. Art, would you agree with that?
I would. So for me, I like to go. If there haven't been any claims and loss control is all set, I like to go. 90 days, 60 days, 30 days. So let's meet at 90 days. We'll get out to market at 60 days. Let's get your renewal done at 30 days. I'd say that's for me. That's kind of the golden rule. However, if there has been any activity, new buildings added, construction losses, all various kinds of claims or issues that arose, at that point, I would highly suggest to start out at 120, if not further out, just to get ahead of everything and make sure that we have ample time to negotiate terms.
That's a good point. Yeah. The more close you can get sometimes with no issues, the better. So I'll throw this one over to you, Art or Patrick, jump in. What are the most volatile lines of insurance coverage right now that we need to be aware of? What are the ones that are just constantly in the headlines, constantly being talked about that you would throw out there as ones to watch?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're seeing a lot on the cyber market and a little bit in D&O, especially as prices go. But property, particularly in CAT or in any area that has some kind of coastal exposure or a high brush exposure, with property hardening, it's really not so much the urban communities that are being affected. It's those that are exposed to that risk. So to me right now, that's volatile. When someone comes with the risk and in Florida along the coast, that's volatile. As opposed to someone that's in the heart of a city like Atlanta.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, Art. One we're also seeing too that has been an issue in the past would be the crime coverage, but fortunately that's not one as applicable. But goodness, cyber for everyone has become an issue. What are some tips and strategies? I kind of touched on these, especially within the property market, and feel free to add any commentary here. Would be telling the story when you send your submission or you have that discussion with your heritage team or with Art's team. Letting them know about the things that have been done, proactively to prevent losses, roof replacements, sprinklers, checked, those types of things, added additions, even landscaping type things, projects that prevent flooding or drainage or anything that can do with the overall risk to make it a better coverage. Railings installed, a new, ordinance on certain types of, cooking out or grilling equipment, things of that nature. Anything that tells a story around pool safety, common area space, monitored, locks are replaced, cameras added, things of that nature just tell a great story that, hey, we truly care about what we're entrusted with to protect. We want to do what's best for our HOA board. We want to make sure the rates and the costs and the comparisons are there for the coverages, and these things just tell a great story. And again, by adding that, like you said, 90 days, 60 days out, you have more time to discuss that with you. And we keep hearing this, a little desensitive hard market, like, okay, we've experienced, two pretty severe years of increases within property, some within liability. Now we're starting to see D&O and cyber, just when will the bleeding stop? And I think that we're starting to see some bright spots on the horizon with underwriters and carriers thinking they're getting to a level, as we say, stabilized. Doesn't mean it's going to be softer, just means it's not going to get those sharp increases. If it's stabilized, they're feeling that they're getting adequate rate for the coverages and for the cost and for the terms given. And so we're thinking that we shall start to see in the next 6 months or 9 months or so it kind of maintain just a level basis moving forward. And then hopefully as the years progress, more capacity comes in, losses. That's policyholders to prevent losses. And if there's no issues, then, we should see some of the benefits of those, the hard work put in. Loss history does really become into a factor in the current market as far as carriers and their underwriting team offering, rate increases. But barring any loss, we should see hopefully some end of this or stabilization, as we'd like to say, in the coming months. So that is good news. Again, I think the cyber market is still one we are far from seeing the end of the hard market, and D&O is still out there. But hopefully, in some of the excess markets, we're going to see it continue to maintain level off. Let's see, we have a question that just came in. Art, I think I'll throw this over to you. It says, does Embroker handle professional liability lines like D&O and fiduciary, etc.?
Yeah, so I think I've been answering these privately instead of publishing, but yes, we are involved in placing that coverage. And there were, I think there were a few other comments if I went privately. I apologize. One, the description for the D&O is incorrect. You're right. It looks like it's for an umbrella. And then I think the other question was, do any of the D&O carriers offer Side A DIC coverage endorsement? And I responded, I'm sure they do. And so if you'd like us to double check for your particular community, we are certainly happy to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, used to, Art, just on that Side A, we've seen that one kind of, used to be a little bit an easier coverage to maintain, just the DIC policy, but even underwriters are getting a little smarter around that being a throw-in sometimes or a catch-all, as a potential coverage. So D&O and cyber, I'd say, are ones that are still we're having to work through. But those are great questions. Someone apparently knows what they're talking about, throwing out sides A, B's, and C's. I think we have another question here, which would be about fidelity insurance in relation to capital and operating accounts. We have submitted for FHA and are being told that we do not have enough coverage, but we need to cover our balances. Art, feel free to jump in here. Potentially
yeah, this should be pretty easy. I mean, they're asking for crime coverage. So that was one of the slides that we'd gone over earlier. It's often included in your package, but we can do standalone as well. So right now it's something we can shop out in the marketplace. Again, feel free to email us or to Heritage, and we can get that for you to what amount you need. And Embroker itself actually will soon have a proprietary crime policy that we can take a look at as well. That might be able to help out here. So yeah, send it on over. We can definitely do our best to make that happen.
Well, great. Well, I think that's all the questions we have for now. We'll give everybody a little bit, of their time back. We didn't want to completely hammer out 60 minutes of insurance, but always find these informative. Melissa, I'll turn it back over to you. Any other things we'd like to hit on with our last few minutes here, or you tell us?
You gentlemen have been wonderful, and we sincerely appreciate your time with us this evening. To Daniel, to Patrick, and to Art, we really enjoy our partnerships with you. We appreciate year over year you continuing to help our communities and our company out. We really, really do value your appreciation and your partnership. And so on behalf of Heritage University, I do appreciate everybody coming out today.